Every time we get to a new landmark on the calendar, my knee-jerk reaction is, man, I can't believe we're finally here. When we got to the season, man, I can't believe we're finally here. When we got to the game against USC, man, I can't believe we're finally here. Now it's the final march. The last stretch of the 2024 season starts this weekend on the road to Wisconsin, everyone's favorite trap game that everyone wants to point to. This game, hey, everybody, don't forget, they play Wisconsin before that big home game stretch of whiteout in Ohio State. Trap game. Well, guess what? Trap game's here. Welcome to our experts and to everyone watching at home. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, Sean Fitz, and Nate Bauer with me to talk about Penn State football, James Franklin's press conference, and, of course, your questions on the BWI mailbag today. All of that, plus other fun and nonsense we got going on. Fitz, welcome to the show. What's new with you after your bye week?
Nothing. Just rested, refreshed, and ready for this trap game. First trap game since the last trap game, and I guess since USC is now 3-4, I guess we can. Is that now a trap game because they're not good anymore? I've lost
throw
how
it
to
away.
Keep all this stuff. We're just throwing that one away.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I look forward to Minnesota then. No, it should be a good week, especially on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Just definitely check us out. But yeah, it's always fun to go to Wisconsin. Always fun to play one of the. I don't want to say the marquee teams in the old Big Ten West, but it's a new world in the Big Ten. I can't wait to see how all this balances out, not only this weekend, but over the next couple of months and years.
Yeah, like we said, we got the BWI mailbag coming up at the end of the show. So if you got any questions, drop them in the chat. We'll get to the juiciest, most conversational ones, along with our featured ones from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Nate, we're starting off with something, is this original reporting? What I call this photo here from you, original reporting of what's going on downtown in State College. Tell us more about this.
Yeah. Does it count if somebody else sent it to me? Like, I wasn't awake that early, nor driving in that part of town. But yeah, it's one of those things where if you are driving by, you can't miss it now. And so that is the intersection of College Avenue, West College Avenue, and Atherton Street. So anybody really kind of getting into downtown State College from north of town is going to see that. And
bless your soul if you drove down Atherton at any point this year.
Well, to be honest with you, you have quite a bit of time to see it because you will be stuck there due to the construction that is going on there at Atherton. In the weeds, State College towny jokes for you guys.
Yeah. Well, with our audience that generally visits State College, if you haven't, I saw a photo. I saw a bumper sticker the other day on a truck that said, this truck climbed Atherton Street because they have been doing continuous construction on it since probably August, right before the Penn State football season. So perfect timing, right? But for our podcast audience out there, what we are showing you is a photo of downtown State College where there is a giant billboard, at least half of a giant billboard of Nick Singleton wrapping around one of the newest buildings downtown. And by new, I mean it's probably 5 years old at this point. So, Nate, what's the deal with, I'd say, city level billboarding in a small town like State College? What's going on there?
Yeah, let's call it what it is. It's new. This is not normal for Penn State football, for downtown State College. You just don't see. It's funny. Like Greg and I were just in LA, and that's pretty much standard, right? In LA, in New York, in actual cities, you have this type of advertising and appealing to people on a broad level by using the infrastructure of the city itself. And so to have Gatorade, right, a national sponsor of Nick Singleton and obviously a partner of Penn State athletics, slap Nick Singleton on the side of a building is different and new and interesting and honestly fun. It's fun to see that. Obviously, when I got that picture, it was not complete, and it, as of 30 minutes ago, I'll guilty as charged. I took 4 laps to like see what their progress was. I dropped my kid off at daycare, looped back around, went and got gas, looped back around. So they had not made the progress to finish the second half of the ad, but certainly by the end of the day today, you would expect that to be in place.
Is this so? I don't want to get into
this. allow me to spill the
Please.
dirt here.
Please.
This is promotion specific. My understanding, I talked to some people. My understanding is this is tied to Gatorade has this whiteout promotion that's kind of tied into.
I was just going to ask about that. Yeah.
Yep, the whiteout. They are giving away, and I had seen that there was going to be a promotion. I wasn't exactly sure what it was, but they are giving away 1,000 white, like Nittany Frost 28-ounce Gatorade, like reusable, right? Like Gatorade bottles.
Okay.
To sweepstake participants. So I will have a story at Blue White Illustrated today that has all those details and the links and all that stuff. But I'm sure, it's one of those things where are Penn State fans going to be interested in that sort of thing? Yep.
Yes. Very much so.
Probably.
I kind of figured there was some sort of whiteout angle, and putting up material like that in a town like State College, where you don't get the general tourist and foot traffic other than a couple select times a year, you have to have something tying into the game that to make that make a lot of sense. So thank you for those details. And of course, like he said, bluewhiteillustrated.com is a place to go to get that. We'll be talking about that in just a second, but we've got to get to this weekend's news. A bye weekend doesn't mean that the Penn State coaching staff or the recruiting staff or the staff in general is just hanging out. That just means they have more time to do different stuff. And different stuff is recruiting. Fitz, it's a big weekend for Penn State recruiting. So what do you got in terms of what we're talking about today?
First off, I could not shoehorn my Nate Bauer commission, the billboard for Nick Singleton joke in there. It did not fit naturally. So this is my retrospective on it. But beyond that, we're talking Penn State recruiting. Busy weekend. Penn State not playing, obviously, but that means coaches can go on the road. James Franklin mentioned, and it's something we'll get to a little bit later, that he left on Wednesday night, had a big stop on Wednesday night, but moved around the region on Thursday. Started in Virginia. Matthew Houghton, Matt Henderson, those two commits down in Virginia. Flew to New Jersey. Saw Braswell Thomas. Thomas, unfortunately, missing the season. He broke his arm when he was camping at Penn State this summer in July. It's just terrible injury that's going to cost him his entire senior season. He's in good spirits, though. He's fine, and he will be good to go and good to play safety for the Nittany Lions when he arrives. Then made a very interesting visit. He went to the Lehigh Valley, where he dropped in the school. And I got to clarify here that he's not actually talking to these guys unless, as you saw with Matt Henderson, who posted a picture with him, that they are already paid, accepted into Penn State. So it's not a contact period, it's an evaluation period. And I say that because he dropped in through Southern Lehigh, and Andrew Olish was there, the Michigan commit, who is, T. Frank, very good.
Yes, he is.
But now this is a big target for Penn State. I know people kind of grew weary of that recruitment, but it's come back around, and Penn State, I think, is done everything it can to sort of put out that, hey, if you want to play tight end, you want to be creative, you want to do a little bit of everything, well, they're doing that this year. Tyler Warren, a big billboard for Andrew Olish to come to Penn State. Michigan's offense kind of struggling a little bit. I don't think this one is done yet. I think it's going to continue to boil on until signing day, and I think Penn State gets them on campus once again. So, or one more time before then. So, just a big target. I know people kind of get tired of tight end recruiting because they think they take too many tight ends. But when you've got production like you're getting out of Tyler Warren, when you've got guys in the pros, when things are going great at a certain spot, why stop? Well, why limit yourself? So they've got Matt Henderson, who I think is a fantastic prospect, but I think Andrew Olish is a top 100 player, and I think it's that his ranking is pretty well justified. I know his competition is not the greatest in the world, but he's a heck of a football player. I'm very curious to see how Penn State's going to try and finish this one off. Again, they've started flip season already. Got Josh Johnson last weekend, still in it on guys like Finney, guys like Zahir Mathis, Olish, a bunch of guys like Ryan and I talked about last week. That flip target board is so much bigger this year, and that's by design, but also it's a testament to the work that they've put in and the relationships that they've built. So very curious to see how this one plays out over the next few weeks. I guess the next 6 weeks until National Signing Day in early December. But I think Penn State's got a shot here.
Yeah, you mentioned Andrew Olesh is a pretty good football player. Some of the things that are different this year, just from his highlight film, and I haven't done any deep digging on his full game footage, but the fact that they have him lining up at tight end in line and blocking, I think is big for his development. Obviously, you're going to do that at the next level, but any familiarity you can have with any of these things that you do at the next level, any head start is helpful. So I appreciate the fact that he's getting exposure to those things. And as you mentioned, the maybe the competition doesn't look great, but he is dominating Fitz. He is dominating in a lot of different areas.
Yeah, and it comes back to college tight ends usually don't play tight end in high school just because the limitations on that position. You're not asked to block much. You're either a glorified receiver or you're kind of like Tyler Warren, you're a quarterback, or you're just the best athlete on the field. Because if you're going to play tight end at Penn State, you have to be the best athlete on every field, because that position has transcended so much in the last 20 years that all of a sudden it's a freakazoid position. It's not not
worth putting out there if you aren't, because the conversation about positionability and versatility, I don't want to pigeonhole this too much, but if you recruit tight end at a high level and you get those difference makers that actually play like a Tyler Warren, that force defenses to make decisions, that's when the position is its most useful. If you have as James Franklin has said, you can put a guy in a bucket that's easier to defend, and now you're not as versatile. So I think Penn State going after those freakazoid guys and being able to get them is actually something that is a difference maker for this program.
And you look at the schools that have recruited consistent great tight ends that end up as high draft picks. You're thinking Penn State, you're thinking Notre Dame, Georgia, Alabama, Iowa. There's a handful of schools that are recruiting at such a high level that they've really sort of up this game. And I'm sure I missed one or two, but Penn State's certainly in that mix. It's kind of like running back. It's kind of like some of those other positions that they just do a great job. So why limit yourself? Why just take one tight end? So
yeah,
that's it comes back to that. And just the versatility here, as you said, makes it hard for defensive coordinators to sleep at night. And I think that's all you're looking for. I mean, you can break a game as a tight end in a different way than Nick Singleton will, or a different way that Amari Evans going down the field will. I mean, you can cause more sort of consternation with a defensive coordinator with a tight end than you can with just a one play big play type guy. So I think that's really what you're looking at with these versatile pieces. You've got Rappleyea is going to come off the injury. Luke Reynolds is playing well for a freshman. He's still the third guy, but there's some promising things there. So they're not stopping anytime soon at tight end, and I think that's the thing to take away from it. And I think that's their pitch really is hey, if you come here, and playing time was a big thing for Olesh the first time around. But if you come here, look at this guy that's one class ahead of you that's playing significant snaps. And granted, you can say Rappleyea is hurt, and that's why, but he was going to play anyway. So I think that's very important when you look at the grand scheme of things at that position. Penn State's done really well. I mean, you can't deny the success. Michigan's done really well too, absolutely. But when you're closer to home and you've got that pitch right in your backyard, that makes a difference.
And you mentioned there was some fatigue with the Andrew Olesh recruitment. And I remember at some point I was having a conversation about Matt Henderson and, Olesh and the comparison between the two. And somebody brought up, well, you know what? Did they even really need Olesh? Because they've got Henderson. He's, is he that much better? And he's really good. Just the things he can do and the way he moves on the field. If you watch those highlights, the fluidity that he runs like a receiver, and he's got receiver-like moves when he catches the football. I just think that when you talk about a guy who has ceiling and potential, I'm trying not to overstate this, but it is in the same realm as a Luke Reynolds. It is in the same realm as a Tyler Warren in terms of this guy, if all things break correctly, can be one of those complete players that does everything and is a legitimate weapon, NFL level weapon in the passing game.
Right. And it's and you never know how those guys are going to pan out. Obviously, there's been some guys that have been highly ranked that haven't made it, but the solution there, take them both, see which one's better, and then play the better one. And that's what Penn State's done at tight end. And they haven't done it in a sense that, you've had to sell out for the higher rated guy or the in-state guy. They did it with Zach Kuntz a couple of years ago. It was him and Pat. Pat was the out-of-state kid, lower ranked. I did not agree with that at the time, but Pat kind of went up. Zach leveled off and ended up at Old Dominion. So, and had a great career. Absolutely. You saw what kind of talent is in that Penn State tight end room when guys are transferring out and can play elsewhere and get drafted. So it's pretty remarkable.
I've camped on this subject and mined this this particular player quite a bit here in this segment, but there are other things that we can get to. I don't know if I cut you off. Were there more on the road conversations you want to have? The full article at bluewhiteillustrated.com, so you can see everywhere and everyone that we have Franklin visiting this weekend. You can subscribe right now for $1. That's promo code PSU1 for 2 months to get access to the website. Use promo code PSU1, 2 months for $1. Fitz, I set you up, I cut you off, and then I'm setting you up again. Anybody else, or do you want to move on to our next topic?
Yeah, just bouncing around the Philly area mostly this weekend. It wasn't one of those situations where they went to Texas or Florida like sometimes they do on the bye week. So stayed fairly close to home. Also went and saw Owen Alicini play on Saturday. So there was some stuff on the road, not a ton, but some very important visits, including a quarterback that's committed elsewhere. So that's very interesting all together when you take in 25, 26, even 27. I mean, it's a visibility thing really at this point in the year.
All right, let's get to 2026 and the On3 recruiting update, which came out this week. So Fitz, 2026 is chocked full of very talented players within the region. So what did you make of what we saw from the latest update from On3, Charles Power and all the guys over at the national recruiting desk and all of the rankings people? What did they do, and what did you see from the Penn State targets on that list?
It is, let me check here, October 22nd, 2024. I'm not putting a ton of stock into ratings this early because so much changed. We're talking about a first 6 weeks of their junior film, which is very important, absolutely, but you can't see everything at this point. So that's where I'll start with that. So if you're getting too high or too low on these, just move forward. You'll be fine. I will say I appreciate the upward mobility of Jahsir Rogers, the receiver from Delaware. As you know, since before he committed, very high on this kid. He's got everything physically. He's got the tape. Again, playing in Delaware, it's going to be tough. But unfortunately, last night we saw one of Delaware's great wide receivers get hurt pretty badly. But it still shows that you can come out and be a real player from that state. So Jahsir Rogers on the way up, Daniel Jennings inside the on 300. Kevin Brown went up a little bit despite not playing this year due to injury. I think he's a 5-star, but it sucks that we don't get to see him. The two that kind of caught the attention was Messiah Mickens dipping and Troy Hune dipping. Mickens, I'll be honest with you, I think was high to begin with. As a guy that's a running back is not a top 100 type guy unless you're an absolute dude type guy. I think Mickens just kind of is regressing to about where he should have been all along.
Quentin Martin sort of conversation, right?
Yes, sort of. I think, you look at Quentin's stuff a little bit more dynamic with the football. Mickens was playing at Trinity, now is playing at Harrisburg, and Harrisburg's usage of him, I think it's kind of best for the team and it's going to benefit them in the long run. Hasn't been a showcase mentality. They've got a couple of good backs there, and they're kind of feeling it out without Sean Lee Jr. at quarterback, and it's still coming along. It's a work in progress. You like for it to be further. You like for him to get the ball a little bit more, but he's playing both ways, which I always like to see for a running back. I think that's pretty important. But I think he's just landing about where he should have been all along. Troy Hune moved down a little bit. He was 58th overall nationally. Now he's 213 nationally. I'm not crazy about this move, to be honest with you. I like Troy a lot in terms of what he brings to the table as like a pure prospect. And I've seen his junior film. I don't see there's anything that's alarming in it. So I'm curious how this came about. I didn't bother Charles with it yesterday, but Ryan will get that at some point.
He was a top 10 passer, right? He's moved down to 19th in the On3 ranking. So is that part of the conversation here, where if you move that far down in your positional ranking, then you commiserately move down in the overall ranking?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's more the overall is kind of slotting it, and then you kind of go back and work backwards from there with the positional rankings. But yeah, I've seen some guys ahead of him in person, and I've seen Troy Hune in person. I don't agree with some of it. I mean, it's like I don't want to talk poorly of the guys that are ahead of him, but like he's a really good prospect. I mean, Texas offered 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the class of 2026, and Troy Huhn was one of them. That says something to me because Sark knows what he's doing in terms of quarterbacks. Which, by the way, Quinn Ewers is still at Texas. It's really crazy to see that drop. If I'm going to editorialize here, it's really crazy to see that drop because I think he's a really good prospect. I think he's having a good junior year.
All right. You want to check out the rest of that article, bluewhiteillustrated.com is where you can go get the total rankings of Penn State's other commits and, of course, the top regional targets. Everyone wants to know about Emmanuel Iheanacho. Is he committed yet? Is he committed yet? Will he commit? Is he going to commit yet? You can see where he ranks in the latest update from On3. Okay. Fitz, the second most important thing you've got to talk about today. Scratch that. The most important thing we got to talk about today is Anti-Fragile. What's going on with our favorite downtown establishment where you can go have a good time, a cheesesteak, and some beer?
Well, it's a bye week, which means fewer people in State College, which is actually great for me as a person that likes to go downtown and find a parking spot. So it's a great time to hop in there. The crowds are not as great. Obviously, we want crowds in there as a loyal sponsor to the Blue White Illustrated Tuesday show. But it's also a great time to get in there. You can hear yourself talk. You can go upstairs. You can sit on the couches. You can do everything that you would do on a normal weekend. It's just a little less pressure packed. So get down there. The best beer in State College, of course, collaborations all over the place right now, and good to elite cheesesteaks. I'm sorry, I was going to say good to great. Elite cheesesteaks at John's. So make sure to get downtown, check out Anti-Fragile Brewing on Calder Way. It is an experience, and we appreciate everybody that on one side has sponsored us, which is the brewery, and everybody that has supported our sponsor. I keep getting tweets and messages and everything like that from people that stop by and say, hey, we got there, or we went to Anti-Fragile, told them that we came from Blue White, and they're appreciative. We're appreciative. So everybody's appreciative, and everybody likes beer. So let's get down there for the next game weekend. I know it's a big one. Ohio State's going to be a noon kick. So that's it's a good time for a breakfast cheesesteak.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is like, why, if you live in State College or if you're coming in a little bit early, why wait? The weather is going to be super nice this week, at least as far as I know. Today and tomorrow is supposed to be in the 70s and maybe even tickle in the low 80s tomorrow. So enjoy sitting outside and having a beer one last time if you can, because there's nothing I love more than sitting outside and having a drink, having a beer outside in the October sun. Like, come on, that is an experience to itself. They have an awning up there as well, so even if it's a little too bright, if you're watching the show, they have upgraded the outside a little bit there in that little shopping plaza. So always appreciate Anti-Fragile being a part of the show. We're going to re-engage. We're going to unplug him and plug him back in. Nate Bauer coming back for Between the Lines. Yes, that was me giving you heads up. You're back on the show, Nate.
They have both gotten reps with runs.
So here's a conversation we're going to start this particular segment with. KJ Winston, the number one question people ask here on the YouTube channel, in the chat at bluewhiteillustrated.com. We answer those questions at bluewhiteillustrated.com. We have not addressed it too much here on the show. Here is James Franklin being asked the question everyone wants to know. Can KJ Winston come back at any point this year?
Yeah, I think I've somewhat answered that question in terms of the long-term injury. And that's about as far as I'm going to go with the details of that, which has been pretty typical long-term injury. But yeah, KJ, we are hoping for him to have a more significant impact in terms of leadership, in terms of all those other things. But right now, KJ's focus is on getting healthy. I actually visited with him and his family on Wednesday night, which was awesome. Me and Dex, that was great. But he's a huge part of our program. Will continue to be a huge part of our program. But obviously, based on some of the things that he was working through from a health perspective, his focus was on that, which rightfully so.
So generally, that's what we have to say at this point. Right, Nate, when it comes to this particular situation,
Fitz.
What James Franklin said is what it is. You want me to go to Fitz?
No, well, Fitz, what was James Franklin doing on Wednesday night?
What was he doing? Recruiting.
Where?
Maryland.
Oh. So if he saw KJ and his dad probably would have been in Maryland. Is that right? Can I read between the lines on that?
I mean, the lines are pretty open in that one, but yes.
Yeah.
you may.
So let's cut through some of this stuff, because honestly, there was a thing a couple of weeks ago where somebody asked Zachy Wheatley about KJ's influence on the room or something to that extent, and Zachy kind of had a strange answer. He just kind of wanted to move on from it, and it's because KJ's not around. Like, KJ hasn't been around. He had to leave the program to take care of what needed to be taken care of physically, and so that is part of the deal. The interpretation that I have from what James Franklin said on Monday is that they hope to get him back. Right? They hope to be able to move that process, to get KJ back around the program, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
whether he's on the field or not, and I think that's the right. Or are you saying
not on the field?
Yeah,
not on the field, like in very blatant terms, right? And that's the way that James Franklin contextualized it on Monday, and it needs to remain as such. Like, Fitz and I have talked about, look, I can't ask every week, like kind of polling sources and that kind of thing. Like, hey, is there a possibility? Right? It like the idea of KJ Winston coming back for the playoff, right? Or the semifinals or the championship game. Like, it's just so far down the road. It's kind of inconsequential to what's actually happening right now. And what's actually happening right now is KJ Winston has to get healthy. He has to work back from an injury, again, unspecified, but serious enough to have to demand medical intervention, right? And so that just muddies the water. it makes it extremely difficult for his future. After that, like, is there a possibility of next year, right? I think that everybody went into this season under the understanding or assumption that KJ would be a prime candidate for moving on to the NFL after this season. I think that door is open of potentially coming back, right? Mm-hmm. Of at minimum, Penn State making that pitch and trying to convince him. I mean, there are dynamics in play here that, one, it's too early to say definitively one way or another how guys are going to go based on NIL, but also like the rev share model could radically change things. There is a whole generation of players where conventional wisdom for when to go to the NFL and when to stay is going to shift, and it's going to shift rapidly based on when schools can start paying players. Right. And when that door opens to say, hey, it's not just the collective and, kind of hand-picked ability to set you up with sponsors that can get you a decent chunk of money. It can be, hey, this is sanctioned ability to pay you market worth.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. And that market worth for certain teams for some players might be higher than what they can earn as a seventh round draft pick or undrafted free agent.
Yeah. And that's kind of the conversation that we're having currently, even without revenue sharing, is guys that are going to be those fringe draftable players. Maybe they have a spot on a practice squad in the future, can fight for a roster spot. Those guys have a more secure future in college. For a guy like KJ Winston, he's good enough, he's going to get drafted. So the conversation has to get to a higher threshold. Now, where he's drafted and how that situation plays out is the conversation to have with him about whether he goes without that final year of film and tries to go on athleticism alone coming off an injury. That's the whole consternation of that conversation right now. I guess, Fitz, how do you weigh on, is there anything else you want to add to this particular conversation? I wanted to have it mostly because when we don't talk about things or there isn't any new information, people tend to make stuff up. So I just want to, in the absence of information, there is no conspiracy here. There's just, this is the situation and it is static. But is there anything else you wanted to add here?
Like
I think just might be a little bit too early for next year right now, because they've got to figure out, not only how that guy, or how he bounces back from, his rehab and all that kind of stuff that comes after it, but also like, how does this project with his position? Like, safety is not a big money position. There's a lot of safeties that get drafted, but it's not a high draft position. And you expect it, as Nate said, to go through this year and then be an eventual high draft pick. That's going to make it tough. He does have tape. I mean, let's not, like, people are acting like that he only played in a couple of games last year. Now this was his chance to be a star. He's got good tape from last year. It's just a matter of projecting that out without 2024, which is very tough to do. On top of that, I keep seeing this is a selfish decision to protect himself over anything. He did try to play against Bowling Green. He tried to play through it. Didn't work. Like, this isn't a situation where he had another decision to make the week after and was like, maybe I can get back and maybe, I can play at 70% or whatever. Like, that doesn't work like that. So I think that people want to say that, especially because they're getting paid now, that this is a selfish decision. But hey, pros get hurt all the time and don't come back, and they still collect a paycheck. So I think that's kind of what you're looking for with KJ, is a couple things. We're not going to get into the specifics, and quite frankly, it's like, that's none of my business, none of your business as well. But like, it's not a situation where he's just like, okay, screw you guys, I'm going home. Like, that's not what's at play.
This is not an early opt out for the draft.
Right.
Which is what I think a lot of people, because there is that pull for a guy who is as talented, who had that expectation, to still want to stay on that timeline. And this is, Fitz, I think that the context to me of the extra film is, yes, safeties, like Jaquan Brisker had one of the best seasons, overall profiles of a player at Penn State in the secondary that I've seen in a long time, maybe ever, from a Penn State defensive back. He went in the second round because of what you pointed out. Safeties, unless you're a freak, unless you're a guy that does corner-like things, a Derwin James or one of these players with versatility. I talked to KJ in the summer, and I asked, like, who do you follow? And he said Kyle Hamilton and Derwin James, and these guys that are those players. So the question wasn't whether he was going to get drafted, because he absolutely was. It was whether he's going to be a first-round pick, because he had the athleticism and he just needed to put another year of tape that teams would be like, no doubt, we need that guy. And that is the part that's over for him right now. And that's, I think, part of that conversation on a personal level that he has to, like, that would be hard. That would be so hard to have to deal with, on top of trying to find what's the new path forward from a sound plan perspective for my future. And those are the things that, that's where the conversation is static right now. To me, that's where he's got to get healthy. We've got to understand some of those things. They've got to make those decisions. They've got to have those conversations.
But how is he going to class if he's in Maryland? That's what I want to know.
The same. I don't know. How are we having this conversation if we're not in the same room, Fitz?
I was going to say, I could probably take a class at UCLA right now if I wanted to. Like, that's... Yeah, it's 2024. Let's go. Yeah.
Okay, so next thing we have is this never-ending conversation of red shirts, Quentin Martin, and running backs.
Yeah, so the way I would describe him right now, he's still a yellow, but he's a yellow where he understands and the coaches understand, if we have to play him to win games, we're going to do that, and everybody's comfortable in doing that. I'd prefer to manage it as much as we possibly can, so that we still have that flexibility and that choice moving forward. But at this stage, we're still trying to preserve it, to have flexibility come the end of the year. And when Nick, was working through some bumps and bruises, that made it more challenging to do that. So nothing has really changed from that standpoint at this stage.
So Quentin Martin, the decision to play, not play. There is this conversation, Nate, about why save a red shirt in modern football.
Yep.
What's the point there? But James Franklin has been very clear. He's adamant that if they can save it, they will. So I guess in this particular context of the conversation with the run game recently, Nick Singleton's bumps and bruises, how do you view the path forward for Quentin Martin?
I think that the last thing that Franklin said on the subject was maybe the most important, which was, quote, I actually think Corey is coming on as well.
Mm-hmm.
Look, they got, how many has Corey played? None?
I don't think he's played any, has he?
0.
Okay. So none for Corey and 1 left for Quentin over the next 6 games. I think they can figure that out.
It's doable.
You know, so just Franklin's point and the sentiment about Nick Singleton and Katron Allen is funny to me because he mentioned, he was like, at the beginning of the season, everyone was talking about enough touches to go around for the receivers specifically. And nobody was talking about it in that context for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, who are two guys who like
demand the football by their play.
You want to talk about like, give me the damn ball.
Yeah.
Those guys are the guys that you have to give the football, and deservedly so. Like, that's who, right? If Tyler Warren is worthy of 17 targets and receptions at Southern Cal, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, they are absolutely as worthy, the same level of worthiness in terms of ball distribution. So those guys are going to play. They're going to be the bulk of what happens. And so do you want to have, like, if Nick Singleton, if Katron Allen have further injury concerns, something that would knock either one out for an extended period of time? Absolutely. Yes. Then it becomes a matter of, you're probably going to have to burn one of their shirts, and you at that point just want to go with the best one. But that's not the situation. That's not what they're in right now. And what they're in is, give Nick Singleton, give Katron Allen the ball. If you need to use a third running back, which again, and you can see it by the number of carries that Quentin has had, and even the number of reps that Quentin has had, right? He played 2 reps out at Southern Cal. That's, I think it's actually kind of arguable or debatable whether or not that was necessary. I mean, maybe it was, because, you know, Nick seemed to be a little bit.
I don't know. He was a great decoy on 2 of them. He was an excellent decoy out of the backfield. He got Tyler Warren open by being a decoy on that one play.
Okay. Well then worth it, right? That was
as half joking. Like, he as just a half joke there.
I don't know. I'm just saying it's the benefit to playing him is not outweighed by the cons.
Mm-hmm.
And so by having that flexibility, by having the ability to keep his red shirt in play and leave those options open, I think it's something that Penn State values.
So this was secretly a conversation about Nick Singleton, which is why we went to Nate. Now we're going to an actual conversation about Nick Singleton here on the next topic, which is the run game.
For us, we got to do whatever we got to do to win, and that will be different each week, and that will look different each week based on, I think, your point, Mike, what we're doing offensively and what the game plan is, but also impacted by that is how the defense, decides the game plan and how the defense decides to play us. I mean, most teams are going to go into the game with something that they are adamant about that they're not going to give up, whether it's, hey, we're going to double team 44, or whether it's we're going to load the box to stop the run. Most people are going to kind of have a plan and say, we're going to stop this. And if they're going to beat us, they're going to beat us doing these things. And I think that really impacts a lot of this. Would we like more production in the running game? Yeah. Would we like more explosive plays in the running game? Yes. Has that been a discussion over the last week during the bye week? Yes.
He then goes on to say, we're going to do whatever we need to do in order to win. And if Wisconsin comes out and loads the box, we're going to run the football, but we'll pivot to what we need to win the game. The interesting thing, Nate, is that I wouldn't characterize either UCLA or USC's plan of attack is to stop the run. Now, I'm not James Franklin. I don't have the insight that he does. But generally, these were 2 teams that you felt like you could run on that they didn't. So I guess what's your perception of where the run game stands right now and where it can go after that bye week into Wisconsin?
Can I just flip it and let you answer it? Because I think that your succinct response to the in press conference thread yesterday was fairly apt. You got 2 pieces of your running game that create most of the explosives that Penn State has in terms of the running game. That
it's why I asked the question I did. you know, this in relation to this conversation about the run game and explosiveness. And the reason I wanted to highlight the run blocking is there was a clear difference in how that team was able to move people off the ball when Anthony Donko was healthy. And James Franklin characterized those as explosive plays the same way as explosive run is. When you lose Anthony Donko and you've already lost Nick Singleton, you're taking all the explosiveness out of the run game. That is it. That, you know, Katron Allen is a very good running back. You give him 6 yards, he'll break a tackle and get 13. Nick Singleton, you give him 6 yards, he might get 30. And so you don't give him 6 yards and he's injured, you know, he gets 3, which is what we saw against USC. And so it's two things here, Fitz. First off, you can never be good enough unless you're playing perfect football, where we're not talking about the passing game because people are asking about the passing game. Why isn't the passing game generating explosive plays? And suddenly they generate 400 yards passing against USC and we pivot to, hey, what's wrong with the run game? But secondly, like, there is something going on with the run game. So I guess how do you navigate those waters?
Yeah, I'm with you in the sense that I agree that USC and UCLA didn't do anything crazy. Like, they didn't put 8 guys in the box and just say, hey, we're going to plug every gap and you guys are going to have to beat us over top. Now, Penn State eventually did do that, especially at USC. But no, I think it's certainly an issue worth working on in the bye week. I think a lot of it is timing. I think a lot of it is not only just with the back, but also the blocking up front. Like, you're running into a lot of backs of offensive linemen. It's akin to, and I just started playing NCAA or college football 25 again. It's like taking the handoff and going turbo right away. Like, that's kind of what you're looking at. And Katron's never been that.
Played Madden ever.
Yeah, well, they took care of that a couple, you know, I'm not sure, I say a couple of years ago, but it's been a while since. Like, it's not ideal just to go full speed all the time. Like, there's something to that. But I think it's really tripped them up, and I think it's been a hindrance on that, because you look at Katron's longest runs in the last couple of weeks. I think it's 11 or 14 yards, something like that, and the one that he could have busted, he tripped over his feet. So, like, there's timing issues all around. He did have a blocker right in front of him. So, you know, there's a lot of things that go into that. And I think that that's something that definitely needs cleaned up, especially when you're talking about a Wisconsin defense that has played well up the middle. Like, their defensive tackles are kind of, you build out from that. And then there's not a ton of speed on that defense. Like, it's a good, solid defense, but I don't think there's any big time speed. So, do you see a little bit more outside zone? Do you see a little bit more trying to get Nick to the edge? Do you see first off, a healthy Nick trying to get to the edge? Like, those are the things that I'm looking at. And big plays are there for the taking against every team. It's just so circumstantial and so lucky, for lack of a better word. Like, you think every play, like, T. Frank, I remember when you say this, you said, somebody said, why don't they have more explosive plays? Well, every run they call, they expect to be an explosive run.
It's designed to give you an explosive play.
It's designed to go 40 yards. It's not, I mean, with the exception of a quarterback sneak or something, like, you know, obviously.
Yeah.
But they're calling that play because they think that there's an advantage there, because they think it can be a big play. It just hasn't come to that. And I think timing is a big part of that.
Yeah. We got to get to the BWI mailbag, because we've got a lot of great questions, and a lot of these things are going to do what everyone wants, which is, let's talk about Wisconsin here. Fitz, you set us up perfectly with your previous answer. Let's dive right into it. Poncho 570 back for another show. He says, which position on offense and defense faces the biggest challenge from Wisconsin this week? You think they've got a good run defense up front that can slow down Penn State, or is there another area you would point to on the defensive side where you think that they actually maybe present more of a challenge than where you started?
Yeah, I think if you're going to single out anyone, I think this is a big week for Nick Dawkins in terms of the challenge that he's going to have, because they are going to, I don't think they're a great defensive line, but their strength is on the interior. They played well last week. I don't know what to make of this Wisconsin team yet, because they're winning. The stats don't line up with that, but they're winning, and they've done some that's the name of the game these days. It's just to win the football game. But I don't think there's anything overly terrifying about him. Like I have to watch more tape, because from what I've seen, a lot of it's circumstantial. They put the ball on the ground. They've had intercept. Like there's a lot of things that you look at the stats and you think this is a below, like a 500 ball club, maybe below 500 ball club. But I just need to see more tape, because I'm very curious how this is going to play out. And I think the situation, like the scenario that they're going into, nighttime, Camp Randall Stadium, very scary. Like that is a definite, like, prototype of a trap game type situation. But I look at Wisconsin, I look at the team on the other side, and it's just like, I got to see more of this, because I'm not sure what I'm missing here. And usually when I do that, that's what we got. Yes, defensively, to me, it's about the running back. It's about keying on that running back. So I think the linebackers are going to be in conflict again this week, and Penn State's got to take care of things up front. I don't think the offensive line is anything crazy. I don't think it's bad, but I don't
it's
think
good, right?
Yeah,
like
there's
good elements to it.
I mean, an average offensive line is a good offensive line in college football, right? So like they do a nice job of working together. I think it's exceeded expectations based on some prior thoughts that I had about the offensive line. So
especially last year, that transition for them was pretty rough on the offensive line. I feel like they're a little bit better integrated in the system, so that talent that they obviously had is starting to come up a little bit more, especially against the run.
And you look at, it's really interesting, because you look at how this team was built for the offense that they came in to try and run, and they tried to change everything. Like Wisconsin's leading the Big Ten in carries, which you would hear that and it would go in one ear out the other, because you don't think anything of it, because it's Wisconsin. But that's not the way that this team was put together and this offense was designed. So that to me is fascinating, that they're able to do it. But they're able to do it in a different way than I think it's built. And
they've pivoted a little bit from last year, where they ran the most passing plays and the most tempo plays. Now they're running the ball more. They're kind of trying to adapt everything to the players they have, which you would have thought that you would do that in year one, but
yeah, it's kind of backwards.
Sometimes you don't make decisions that are great in the moment. I love this here from Kyle K. He says, and I apologize, Fitz, you were giving a very good response, and he just put this in the chat, and I started laughing out loud. Wisconsin runs the dairy raid offense, not the air raid. For those of you that don't get the joke, I'm going to ruin it by explaining the joke. The dairy raid offense, I really like that. I think the coverage unit is interesting. He mentioned not Jim Tressel. He's Mike Tressel. Yeah. Michigan State. I see a lot of Michigan State tendencies in terms of, like, this is a very well coached secondary with a lot of versatility and players that can challenge Penn State's passing attack. I'm interested to see how Drew Aller goes up against this unit this week, because I think from a tactical perspective, this might be one of the best challenges he sees this year. Nate, I'm going to come back to you with this question. And I don't know, Adam C. put this in the chat. I like this question. I don't know the answer to it, and I don't know that you know the answer to it, but this is a good conversation to have. Penn State still seems like it has a lot. It has yet to play its full potential. If you agree, what factors have most contributed to that? Do you think Penn State has played to its fullest potential yet? Is this what it is, or if not, what are the factors there, Nate?
I think that each side of the ball has had periods of playing to their full potential. I don't think they've done it together, and I don't think it's happened for 4 quarters. And I think most importantly, nobody does, for the most part, right? It just, like, against good opponents, it's never going to be as clean as you want it to be. It's never, right? I mean, sometimes you catch a hot streak of blackjack and you go with it. But more often than not, the other team's trying to not let you be awesome all the time. And so that really throws a wrench into what your plans are. But I do think I've seen enough to have a pretty good idea of what Penn State at its full potential looks like. I think defensively, turnovers are an issue that, Jalen Reed interception at the end of that USC game aside, and that is not one to put aside. It came in a clutch moment. It came in an important moment. But I just think, generally speaking, turnover creation has been an area that Penn State's defense
Yeah. I
has
looked into that during the bye week, and I think that there's some schematic exchanges they're making that lead to a lack of interceptions specifically. And that is a choice as opposed to a deficiency. And you always want everything. And Penn State doesn't only play man coverage, and they don't only play press, but they do play a lot of it, which reduces your opportunities to get your hands on the football in a way to take it away. You know, Jalen Reed was in a deep safety role. He was not in man coverage when he got that interception, just as an anecdote to point to the issue I'm describing.
Yeah, and I'm going to take the complete opposite approach and just give my anecdote, which is Abdul Carter having the ball hit him in the chest at the 11-yard line.
Very good point. Yes, very good point.
With an opportunity to really change the dynamic of that game. So yes, defensively, I think that's one side of it, and then offensively, I do think that a full health Nick Singleton, full health offensive line, if that's possible, they've had the opportunity, and now they have done it, of passing their way to get back into a game and win a game. Mm-hmm. So they did that. That's on film. You can't take that away from them. How did defenses approach that moving forward? Most likely, they're still going to key in on, like, they're going to make him do it again, right? More defenses are going to say, Drew, go ahead, like, beat us, but he's demonstrated that he can. And so if that is on the table of both of those elements working in tandem, demanding, they got the best receiver play of the day in the most critical moments, mm-hmm. where they had 3 quarters before that and again, obviously I'm talking about the most recent thing, but 3 quarters before that where it really didn't live up to what it needed to be, right? There were missed opportunities in the first half, in the third quarter of that game. So I think that the passing game can be better. The explosive running game can be better. And if you tie those two together, it creates some real conundrums for opposing defenses.
Fitz, I just want to underscore part of what Nate said there, and I want to come to you with this. Even the obvious stuff, we've mentioned a lot of the conversation about maybe Penn State not reaching its full potential because of injury so far this year. KJ Winston, Nick Singleton, Anthony Donko. Those are 3 of your best players on your team that were all injured or now gone. But beyond that, the receiver room hasn't been healthy this year. So how much do you think that plays into it? Because next man up is what everyone's going to say, but I guess I don't know how you feel about that. So do you think that prevents them from playing their best, or is that just an excuse, which is what some people will point to?
Well, everybody's going to call it an excuse. No, I think, look, health is health. Like there's no getting around that. And you can't just go out and sign a replacement. And that's what's, kind of, I think, skewing how this all works, because a guy goes down. So you've got 4 receivers right now. So one of those guys that goes down, you've got 3 receivers, and you're not exactly counting on Tyler Johnson and Anthony Ivy to step in and be that guy. So it's, how do you coach around it? I think Andy's done a really good job of it. I think Tom Allen has done a decent job of it, but I think he's probably had more on his plate in terms of what he has to fix in that situation. And I know not having Nick there takes a lot of the explosiveness out of the offense. But not having KJ in there is such a big deal, because it changes what Jalen Reed does. It changes what the linebackers have to do. It changes everybody in that back 7. So I think that's something that they're still working through, just because they don't have the numbers. I mean, Day-Day Lane, I think, is going to be a good one. He's not a good one yet. Like that's kind of where you're at. And that's college football. I mean, that's not really anything new to the sport. And you're going to find a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, these repeat narratives and things like that, not new to the sport at all. It's just playing out with different names. So I think that comes down to it. So yeah, it's how you coach around it and how big the challenges are that you have to coach around, really.
Speaking of maybe some of those challenges, G418 asks, how concerned should we be about linebacker depth? Fitz, I'm going to come back to you for this one. What do you think in terms of real concern here?
real concern. I mean, you're living on the edge, obviously, especially, you can get a week to get Tony Rojas up and going, and, you feel pretty decent about your front line if they're going to tackle, basically. But you're always living on the edge there because you're playing 4 linebackers right now, maybe 5. Tamir really didn't play much at USC, if at all, on defense. So you're looking at those 2 guys. You're looking at DeLuca. You're looking at Elsdon, who they still trust out there. I know he's got some shortcomings, but they still trust him out there. So that's kind of what you're going with. And again, it's how do you coach around it? Like, one of those guys goes down. What does that mean for Zion Tracy? What does that mean for Cam Miller? And they've leaned on those guys more recently because I think they not only they're playing well, but also they're supplanting roles and taking roles over from a Sam linebacker or something like that along those lines.
And fortunately, the situation dictated that they were the right matchup against USC and UCLA, which like to run 11 personnel. That is what I would say about Wisconsin, given their switch to this air raid offense. I'm interested to see. I need to go and do a little more digging on that in terms of what's the percentage of 11 versus 12, run versus pass, all that stuff, because that is a big conversation about this week as well. James Franklin once again mentioned he'd like to get Jalen Reed back into that field position to get him closer to the line of scrimmage. Nate, you're just going to round this conversation out for us because this came from Losie's Mustache. I edited this a little bit, Losie's Mustache. I hope you don't mind. Do we think Corey Smith plays this week instead of Quentin Martin, considering Smith is from Wisconsin and Franklin wants to preserve Martin's red shirt? Do you think that's a reality or a possibility, Nate?
Sure. I don't think it matters, right? I like maybe between the 2 of them, obviously only one plays, and the one that plays might get a carry. So I don't see a significant impact being there unless, again, for whatever reason, I think that Nixon.
This is a blowout situation or a different situation. This is not a standard game goes into the 4th quarter conversation.
Yeah, game in doubt, go with Martin. Scattered anywhere else, go with Smith. Like, I don't think there's too much into that. And I think Corey will be on the travel roster. I don't think he went to USC, but I'll have to double check that travel roster. But like, I think it's all about the situation. And I think if you need like legitimate carries, Quentin is ahead of Corey. But if you need cleanup, hey, great. That would make it easier on everyone.
This conversation, I want to end with this conversation in the chat because this came up again. In one of the questions to James Franklin yesterday and is here. Mech Engineer says just a better start would help. And I think he means for the team overall, not just specifically for the defense. I'm going to start this with just my thought on the perception that Penn State is not playing well overall in first halves, even though James Franklin put the scoring numbers out there from that perspective yesterday. And the data says that they are not starting slow specifically. But Nate and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. When they've had the opportunity to put a team away in the first half, to do a thing that prevents that team from being a real threat into the 3rd quarter, they have not done that so far. Either on defense by playing shut down, lights out, 3-and-out football for 2 quarters, and the offense just basically handing them points, or the offense putting up points, yards, and explosive plays on defenses you expected them to steamroll. They have not done either of those things in the first half, allowing teams to hang around a little bit longer. Even though they've played well, as Nate, as you said, in one phase or the other throughout a game, they have not put all of that together at one point. Do you think that's a fair assessment of Penn State's play this year, or do you still stand on the hill of they've played well offensively and defensively, they have started fast, so therefore the conversation is incorrect from the basis of what we're talking about?
I think that it is not completely meritless, but is mostly meritless. Right? I just don't think the facts back it up. Here's what I think happens, and this is a broader conversation for another time, but I think that 2 or 3 plays often dictate perceptions that when you really dive into it and you really go play by play, just look through the sheet and see how something transpires. The perception of not starting fast at Southern Cal is solely dictated by an offensive pass interference call and an end around. 2 plays. Because other than those 2 plays, Penn State moved the ball well offensively. They were fine, right? They just didn't cash in. They did not get, and does that count? Yeah, of course. That they have to be better at that. They have to take advantage more. Drew Aller's interception in the first half didn't help things, but also the defense isn't getting any credit for really steadying themselves after a 1-play one-off, which do you like it as a Penn State fan? No, but it happens. It happens to a lot of people. And so Penn State is able to, they did things to stay in that game, even though it felt in the stadium and probably to a lot of Penn State fans as though it was like a first half collapse. It wasn't. There were a couple of plays that didn't go Penn State's way. That Penn State, yes, needs to be better at and needs to execute better. But I thought that the actual nature of the game, the personality, like the character of the game, came through more in the second half than it did in the first half. Like, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes it's not reflective by the scoreboard the way that it was in the second half. And so, yeah, I think
you're to your point, there was an end around and a flea flicker. That was a broken play that didn't even work. Those were what generated the points for USC, as opposed to Penn State, which was running offense and was succeeding and was mostly stopping them on defense. Fitz, how do you feel about this particular conversation to get us out of here today?
Yeah, I agree with Nate. It's the big things that stick with people, and the performance as a whole as a defense has been very good, like very good. You don't want to give up 30 points to USC, but like you look at the grand scheme of things, and they've been where they need to be and beyond that, basically, to win football games. Now, this is going to be another test this weekend because you look at Wisconsin, they run a lot of plays. They run no huddle. They're going to keep things up. So Penn State's going to do their little shit housing with substitutions and everything like that if they're able to try and slow them down. But it's going to be something that you look at as something that's going to have an effect on the game. If Wisconsin can keep their personnel units together, and that means they're on schedule, that could be another issue for Penn State. But yes, I agree with that. I'm going back to the original question about fast starts and everything like that. Wisconsin's been very all over the map in terms of that. They ran a ton of plays against Northwestern last week, and they scored at the beginning of the second quarter, but they didn't score in the first quarter. It's very, this team bucks a lot of trends when you're talking statistical analysis versus like actual proof on the field, because Alabama came out and suffocated them. That's what Wisconsin wants to do. They want to get some points on the board. They're not a team that I don't think is built to play from behind.
They run a lot of simple things. Right. They run a lot of it. Yeah.
So now I'm very curious to see how this one plays out, because I don't have a needle on this team right now, because I can see the pathway to successful, but do they have the personnel to do it? That's another question. They scored 14 points early against Rutgers. They scored 14 points early against Purdue. What are you taking from Rutgers and Purdue these days? I don't know. Purdue is not great, and Rutgers, as they're really banged up, and they've moved themselves into not great after a pretty promising start. So I just don't know. I don't know. But Wisconsin's going to be a different team than people are expecting, and I think that's going to be something that plays out, especially in the first half, with substitutions, with snaps being played, with guys getting tired, etc. So that's going to be it's just very interesting scout.
And we'll do that scouting work. We'll do that homework, and we'll talk about this game coming up more on Wednesday and, of course, Thursday, which is our preview show and our recruiting show all rolled into one. All that coming up this week on the BWI Live Show. Of course, more stuff at bluewhiteillustrated.com, the main source of your information for Penn State football. Once again, thanks to Sean Fitz and Nate Bauer for talking football with us. Fitz, what do you got?
Chad Simmons just dropped an RPM for Flip Target, so just check that out if you get a chance.
Ooh, you got the tingle. Did you feel that in the back of your head, everybody? There you go.
I was looking down at my phone most of the show, so sorry for the lack of eye contact, but it's more important than
yeah. He's the Adam Schefter of the show is doing all his work back and forth. Actually, we got 2 of those on the show here because Nate is also getting sources. Anyway, we got to get going. We'll be back tomorrow with more on the BWI Live Show. Talk to you then.